Well, greetings to you. We thank you for being a part of such a wonderful, I believe, call to action, the virtual community and legal issues clinic. And this is our February 2022. I greet you in the spirit of peace and love and much prosperity. I thank Joseph Richardson, his wonderful team, just for this opportunity to just be able to introduce you and to host this wonderful event at the Uplift Gospel Church. We know, and I believe, and my prayer is that this event is going to be impactful, insightful, and inspirational, and that it's going to give you a lot of the information you need in order to be productive, to be successful, and just to be able to maneuver in such a climate that we live in now. I would like to just kind of give you from a spiritual place why this is so significant and why that we need to make sure that we equip ourselves with the knowledge and the tools that are given by our counsel, by our law experts and our health professionals. Proverbs, Solomon, known in the Christian faith as one of the wisest men that God has allowed in the earth, writes a couple of things on counsel. He says in Proverbs chapter number 11, verse number 14, where there's no guidance, a people falls, but in the abundance of counselors, there is safety. He goes again in chapter number 15 as he is teaching, as he's raising up a younger generation. He tells them, without counsel, plans fall, but with many advisors, they succeed. And we find that as wise as Solomon was, his son failed to heed the voice of his father, to make sure that he had counsel, to make sure that he grabbed the right information and had the right people on his team. Rehoboam lost and had a split in the kingdom, all because he listened to the wrong voices. And in the day that we live in now, the social media is so critical in the lives of people and plays such a vital role. We want to make sure that you hear the right voices, because the wrong voices can lead us into a place where we lose and not win. Here today, you will hear people who are experts in their field. You'll hear people who really have a heart to see you succeed. You'll hear people who are great at their craft, great at their gift, have done years of experience, who have faith and hope to believe we as a people, we as humanity can be better. And so I just want you just to really tune in, to focus. I really want you to make sure that you listen through all the presentations, that you hear what is going to be presented today. I mean, we have great things from COVID-related policies to family law, to criminal law, mental health, to your physical health, for your health is your wealth, and so many things that you're going to watch that are cutting edge, that are critical for the moment we live in. All of these things pertain to the very moment we live in. We live in moments that things are changing. The world is changing, and we want to be a part of the change. We want to be a part of the advancing of society, that when we leave here, we know that we left the world in a better place than when we came. And so I applaud again Joseph Richardson and his wonderful team. I applaud all of those experts who will come, who have given their time and have really came to pour out to make sure that the community is in a better place, so that the community has the information that they can make informed decisions. So God bless you, God keep you, and we know that you're going to be better, and things in your life will be better due to the fact that you tuned in to this wonderful virtual community forum. I want to introduce to you the dynamite man himself, the man, the myth, the legend, the champion for the rights of people, Joseph Richardson, Esquire himself from MWA. So
Thank you, Pastor Frank. Appreciate you hosting us. Once again, we're talking about several issues, not only legal issues, but things that connect to legal issues, things that if they are not dealt with, if they are not handled, if they are not managed, become legal issues, okay? And so the key is to give you some practical things. You're penalized for what you don't know. Even the Bible says that we're destroyed for lack of knowledge. And so, you know, sometimes when things go and they hit the fan and you end up having problems, a lot of times we like to say our fallback is, oh, I didn't know. Well, it doesn't matter if you didn't know necessarily. That means that you didn't mean to have what happened, but you're still dealing with consequences, okay? So, by the way, I'm looking in the right direction, right? Should I be looking towards that camera?
Yes, you can look at the camera.
Okay, perfect. Just making sure. So here's what I thought I would do. I thought I would just give you a couple recent developments related to related to COVID. You know, there's a bunch of stuff out there. One of the things that we'll do, we'll provide a resource. As we're going on, we'll edit it in. I'm going to include a few websites that talk about county to county, some local COVID things, some local COVID restrictions and that type of stuff. I'm going to give you a little information on a couple cases, Supreme Court, state cases, state laws, things that are going on related to mandates, because that seems to be where everybody kind of wants to talk about and is paying attention to, and is quite a moving target. And then I'm going to give you what I like to call tales from the lab. Talk about a couple kinds of cases we're dealing with and some things to maybe look for in that regard, okay? So help me here as I am using an iPad and I am a PC person. So first of all, we're talking about the Supreme Court here, and hopefully this is showing up where people are able to see it as we're going through the on-demand product here. So let me talk about a couple cases that have come down to the Supreme Court lately. It was a big question as to whether and to what extent the Supreme Court would actually allow for the mandates that have been done by executive order by the president. Okay, so that's a big deal, right? And depending on who you are, people are on different sides of the issue. We should be able to mandate folks. We should be able to mandate this type of professional, but not that type of professional. Oh, I'm free and I feel free. I ought to be able to go to work, or I ought to be able to not have to wear a mask, or whatever the case, or not get vaccinated. That has split up families and people falling out at Thanksgiving and whatnot about vaccination. So, okay, so there's a couple key cases that came down in January, right about the same time with the Supreme Court. They did two things. So, and all of these are direct responses to executive orders that the president has issued, okay? So there was one executive order that was issued that required businesses over a certain type, private businesses over 100 people, I believe, to be either vaccinated or have a masking and testing policy. Okay, so that was one of the cases that was brought. Case was brought immediately, and even though, and this is one of the things that will often happen, even though the merits on these cases tried at some time down the road, most of the time when someone is trying to stop a practice, they'll ask for preliminary, relief, where you keep the practice that's being instituted that you want to protest from being instituted during the pendency of the litigation. So all of these litigations are still going on. All of these cases are still going on, but there were initial hearings to see whether or not the mandates would actually be stopped in the meantime. So as it pertains to the first case where the businesses over 100 people, private businesses, were required to be vaccinated or have a masking and testing policy, the Supreme Court blocked that. They blocked it 6-3, probably went down conservative versus liberal lines. And so they blocked it, okay? And so therefore that, for the time being, even while it weaves through litigation, for the time being, that requirement, the larger businesses require employees to be vaccinated or to have a masking and testing policy, is undone. There's another case where there was a lawsuit because there was a Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services vaccination mandate for healthcare workers. That's another thing that was issued by either executive order or by, directly from the president, or some kind of regulation that came on the executive side. There was a lawsuit related to that. The lawsuit is still pending, but in the meantime, can they be required to keep the vaccination in place? And the court actually said yes. And so therefore, for now, vaccination mandates for healthcare workers at federally funded healthcare facilities, that is still okay for now, okay? So it's still weaving through litigation and whatnot, but for now, the vaccinations, required vaccinations for healthcare workers at federally funded facilities survives. So the long and the short of it is the mandate for private businesses is squashed for now, and the mandate for healthcare workers in federally funded places, health facilities, survives. Okay, that's what we got for now. Okay, on that. Interestingly, for those of you that have flown and you've worn your mask, and hopefully you haven't gotten in a fight on the plane because people have a couple beers in the bar and they decide they want to be free and they don't want to wear their mask or what. Not to be insensitive to those of you that don't think you ought to wear your mask or have to get vaccinated, but it is kind of ridiculous when you're not the person flying the plane that you get in beef on the plane. But in any event, could have just drove wherever you were going. But in any event, the Supreme Court has rejected an emergency request to block a federal mask mandate for air travel. Actually, a father did it on behalf of himself and his young autistic child. Filed a lawsuit, wanted the mandate to be crushed on planes for now. The court has said no. So the Supreme Court, and in that case, not to get too technical, sometimes a Supreme Court case, an emergency order is asked to be issued, and depending on where it is geographically, it will go to just one justice. And actually, this one went to Justice Neil Gorsuch. Neil Gorsuch rejected it, and he rejected it without comment or dissent. Okay? And this arises out of the president's executive order that requires passengers on airplanes and other public transportation to wear masks. Okay? So where we are right now is a general statement. Got to wear your mask on your airplane. Don't have to have a mask mandate if you are in a larger company, private company, but you do for healthcare workers at federally funded facilities. Okay, so that's where we are right now as it pertains to that. I could say more about it, but that's all I want to say for now, just to give you a sense for what's going on. But it's a moving target, and it's going to continue doing what it does. Let's talk a little bit about California. Here are a couple things that are coming up. These are some laws that have been proposed that are, I think, quite interesting. Okay, so California is leaning toward mandating more school-age students to be vaccinated. Okay, specifically, there has been introduction of a bill that would supersede Governor Gavin Newsom's student COVID-19 vaccine mandate by eliminating the personal belief exemption. So right now, even though there was a mask mandate, even though there's a vaccination mandate for students at a certain age, there is a personal belief exemption. This bill would actually get rid of the personal belief exemption. Okay, and so actually what that would do is it would require all kids from kindergarten to 12th grade to get the shot by January 1st, 2023. That's what it would require, and only students with rare medical exceptions could opt out. So stay tuned on that. That's still going on. Here's another one that's going on. There's a bill coming up that would basically allow kids 12 and up to get vaccinated without parent consent or knowledge. Okay. Actually, I didn't know that myself, to tell you the truth. And in fact, what it would allow is not just for COVID-19 vaccinations; it's actually for all vaccinations. And I didn't know that, and so it's interesting to look at. And this would go to all vaccinations, like we mentioned, including COVID-19, and it would be for minors ages 12 to 17. So stay tuned on that. California tends to lead the way on some of these types of things. California is going to most of the time err on the side toward vaccinations, towards mandates and things like that. So you have to continue to pay attention. what do you do if you don't like it? I don't know, because we're in a pandemic still, and people will feel how they feel about it. But you could always file your lawsuit and go from there. I think that there are agencies out there that are pro-freedom or whatever else. There may be avenues that way, but it is very much a moving target. But without sliding into an exemption, I think people that go to school day to day are going to get closer and closer to being required to have mandates. Okay, so let's talk about a couple what I like to call tales from the lab. So I'm going to talk about a couple general issues that I've been dealing with lately, and then give you some advice on what we need from clients. Those are the attorneys in the room could absolutely say amen, because nobody messes up your situation, like a client that's maybe a little less than truthful, or some of those types of things, or they decide to let you know what they think you ought to know, as opposed to letting you know everything that's potentially relevant. So let's talk a little bit about that. Been dealing a lot with discrimination and harassment. Okay. And as I may have mentioned before, there are several avenues for discrimination. I tend to deal with the state side, even though there's some federal things that we deal with as well. And so that usually looks a couple different ways for me. Sometimes I do Section 51 discrimination in the use of facilities and those types of things. I've had a couple lawsuits in that regard. But most of the time, I'm dealing with discrimination and harassment in the employment context. Under the Fair Employment and Housing Act, there are certain things there are certain conditions of employment that should exist, and you should not be discriminated against, harassed, or retaliated against as someone in a protected classification. Protected classification can be everything from sex, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, just a lot of categories in that regard. So I've had a couple lately where I've had one on the harassment. There's a fair amount of sexual harassment out there still. Most of the time we see it in the context of the women being actually sexually harassed. But sometimes it could be men being sexually harassed. It could be people being harassed for any of a number of reasons. And so I had one recently where there was a younger person, somebody in their 20s that was starting at a new job, and she was informed right away that the boss liked to do things a certain way. He actually didn't particularly care even to have employees that had kids or that were over a certain age and this kind of thing. And she found herself getting comments that weren't necessarily welcome. But what do you do when you're trying to keep your job and you have a family to support, and certain things are said and certain things are done, and some certain things are done on the clock that shouldn't be, and then ultimately you're sexually propositioned, and when you rebuff the sexual advances, you find yourself fired. Well, hello? That would be sexual harassment. Hello. Okay. All right. So I've dealt with that in that context. Often when you see harassment issues, they're going to be in the context of comments about sexuality, comments that are specific to gender, comments that would be unwelcome in the workplace. And here's something that, guys, listen, I really want to be sympathetic. Often when we talk about, pick a case, we talk about Bill Cosby or whatever else, often someone on the other side of the issue or one side of the issue is going to say, well, were these comments or were these things that happened welcome? Did somebody know that they were in this situation or whatever else? And I'm not coming down one side or the other on Bill Cosby, but what I am saying is that you have to be prepared for the notion that they're going to always look at the extent to which the things that were said and done were welcome. So if I am a person at a workplace and I allowed certain things to be said, even if you may have had your reasons for allowing them because you wanted to pick your battles or whatever else, that may potentially be a defense. So it's really important, if you can, to be as clear as you possibly can about a compliment not being welcome, about a hug not being welcome, about certain interactions with you and other people at the workplace not being welcome. It is important to be clear as a bell about that, because sometimes when things change midstream, you can take a compliment, not think of it as sexual or anything like that, and then the next thing you know, something progresses. You may feel a little pressure a certain way or whatever else, but it never gets any easier to cut something off. And so I'm not saying that to be insensitive to people that are potentially sexual harassed, but what I'm saying is there is always an evaluation of the context of something said, of something done, and that type of thing. So it's really important to have your boundaries and to be as crystal clear as you can possibly be, because depending on the situation, something that is done as to this particular group of people may be considered sexual harassment, and something done as to this particular group of people may not be considered sexual harassment. And that's why you really have to be careful about that. It's totally unfair. I agree entirely, but that's how it goes. Okay? So you have to be careful about that. I am seeing discrimination, harassment, and retaliation based on race, ethnicity, disability. Sometimes, people ask for their time off, or because they have an FMLA issue, they have to care for a family member, or because they have to care for themselves, they have to be off. They ask for a workers' comp form. They ask for a WC-1 because they believe that they have a workplace-related injury, and those types of things. When you suffer an adverse consequence because you asked for something in that regard, or because you took time off work, which you had a right to do under the law, if you suffer an adverse consequence because of that, you actually may have a claim related to discrimination or retaliation for a medical condition, physical condition, those types of things. So your starting place should be, as things are occurring at your workplace, how and to what extent they are out of sorts. In other words, if you knew that you had 5 days of sick leave, if you knew you had 3 days of sick leave, and the boss started tripping on you once you got back from taking a day of sick leave, then that's a problem. Okay? Now, ideally, it's something, often you make withdrawals of goodwill based on goodwill being in the ground in the first place, based on plannings of goodwill. So if you're at a good workplace, if you work with people that are good, if your boss is good, they let you know where you stand, they're fair, they've stuck with you, things like that. If you have a problem and you can have a discussion about it and get the discussion resolved, I will say on behalf of businesses that often businesses are, people that are big enough to have W-2 employees, but not big enough to have HR departments. Sometimes they have problems with the rules changing and them not knowing that the rules have changed. Okay? Now, should they know? Yes. Are they penalized for not knowing? Potentially so. But listen, if you're at a place that's good, where your boss is fair and those types of things, and there's a problem, if you can work it out, work it out. I'm telling you to go to court and do these other things as a last resort, not as a first resort. I am in court, and Jocelyn, who's going to be speaking later, is in court, and Kamala, who's going to be speaking later, is in court. And often we will tell you that going to court is not necessarily the first option, nor should it be. If you are in a relationship with someone, an employment relationship, a business relationship, or whatever else, and there's potential for the future to that relationship. I'm at my job today, there's a problem, I would still like to be at my job tomorrow. If you can treat the situation and resolve it as if you're contemplating a future with the other side, then maybe it can get resolved. Don't just run to sue people on technicalities. By the way, I don't like suing people on technicalities, okay? Because there need to be more good employers out here. And I told the story before of a guy who made an $80,000 mistake. I represented him. He was the employer. Basically, he knew he was large enough to have W-2s, not large enough to have HR. He knew that when it came to an alternative work schedule, there had to be a private ballot. He did not know he had to file the result with the state. So somebody comes along who he fired twice. That's the other thing. No good deed goes unpunished. So the lady that really shouldn't have been there at all, tell you the truth, keeping it real, she goes, gets a lawyer, gets technical, and hits him for $80,000. Okay? If that's you, listen, you got somebody out there, you're an employee, and your good boss has a technical violation, and all of you want to be on an alternative work schedule, but you upset, and now you want to sue them, don't call me. Now, if your boss is doing stuff that, what we would say back in Indiana with the family is, stuff they know they don't got no business doing, that they don't have any business doing, things that they know they're not supposed to do. They know it's wrong. They told you things. I've got a client I'm representing now in a discrimination case where they told him that the boss called him boo and told him that he needed to go back where he came from and be with his own kind. Come on now. Now, you know better than that. Okay? So, if you got that case, call me, because we know that something in the milk isn't white. We know that there's a problem, and they know that there's a problem too. So I just say be careful about that. So discrimination and harassment. The other thing I'm going to mention real quickly is public policy. Often the same facts will lend to a public policy problem, even if it's not a discrimination problem. Discrimination can be hard to prove, by the way, BTW, without a smoking gun being called out of your name. I have some of those cases. But sometimes people think, they believe in their soul, morally, that this issue is a discrimination issue. And it might be. But if it's morally and it's in your brain, but the words haven't necessarily been said, it's hard to prove. However, though, if you have informed your boss of something that you reasonably believe to be against the law. I had this happen with a guy. Listen, tell you right now, employers, this is for you. Write this down. Never fire the HR director that knows what they're doing. Because by them doing their job, they're telling you about things that they reasonably believe to be against the law. And then you turn around and fire him for him telling you the truth. Had that happen. Great case, by the way. Great client. But he knew his stuff. He knew his stuff better than the other folks did. They bring in another person, change the job title for her, and she didn't know what she was doing. She got in there. Proved it that she didn't know what she was doing. They fired my guy, escorted him out with an armed guard just to embarrass him. And so by the time I came around to suing them and getting just a little bit down the road, they had already fired the lady who was the mistake, who shouldn't have been there. Okay? But public policy basically means that when someone has an adverse consequence against you because you've talked about something that you reasonably believe to be against the law, you don't even have to be right. Boss, isn't that against policy? People aren't supposed to take money and shift it over and keep it. It's not supposed to happen. Boss, isn't this a problem? We actually were supposed to write people up within 5 days, and you're writing somebody up 2 months after the fact, after you have an argument with them. Okay? If there is an adverse consequence for someone pointing that out, there's the potential for a public policy violation. And the thing that's important, and I think I've said this before, but this is why it really needs to be reiterated. Sometimes people think they have a discrimination case, and they might have a discrimination case in their heart, but it's hard to prove, but the same facts can give you public policy. Okay? And what's important about public policy and what has changed is the equalizer for employment cases is attorney's fees. Unless you get attorney's fees by contract, you and I are in business together, and we say as part of the contract, if someone has to sue someone else, the winner is going to get this attorney's fees paid by the loser. You put it in the contract. I had somebody call me, guys, listen, get these contracts together, talk to an attorney about it. I had a lady that, another story, I didn't represent her, lady, somebody borrowed $50,000 from her. She does a little half-page contract. I had one question for her. Now she wants to get the money back because they're not paying. I said, you have attorney's fee provision contract. Oh, I don't think so. Okay, now you got a collectability issue, and there's potentially less exposure. Often, the attorney's fee provision is what is a great equalizer. In employment, attorney's fees are granted by law as it pertains to wage and hour issues, as it pertains to discrimination issues, and now as it pertains, and discrimination, I mean FEHA, Federal Fair Employment and Housing Act discrimination, as well as public policy. So until 2 years ago, you couldn't get attorney's fees for public policy. I remember in that very case I'm telling you about, the HR director, I had 14 causes of action. I had public policy, I had wage and hour, and I had discrimination. And they said, you're not going to be able to prove discrimination in this case. And I told them, I said, I don't need to, because I've got public policy violations. Okay, and that case settled early in the litigation for 2 years' salary. Now, that doesn't mean that that's always going to happen. But these are the things that I need in order to intensify or to give your case your best opportunity of success, or what people could call success. It's never guaranteed. A result is never guaranteed. But this is what's really important for you to understand. Be well documented. The keys to evaluating the case are three things. How well documented you are. In other words, if you say that Jim Bo did this and that and the other, and then they pushed me and they did this and that, whatever else, the more that is documented, the more that there's a paper trail, starting off even with your own chronology, the better off you are. When you have a he said, she said situation, nobody's going to admit that they did something to you that's going to lend to their legal liability. That's not going to happen. And here's the other thing, too. There's the other thing you got to be aware of. In the real world, somebody will tell you on your job that they'll support you because they saw this or that thing happen. But when somebody's trying to keep their job, those things change, too. So that can be very difficult, okay? So how well documented you are, confirming things with emails. When they have you come in and do something, we need to have a discussion about this issue or that issue. Have a witness if you possibly can. Look at the actual rules that the employer has. As a matter of fact, it might not be a bad idea to see whether those rules exist. Have a conversation about them ahead of time. So that you're not looking at whether or not they exist once you get into a situation. So, keys to evaluating the case. How well documented you are. How forthcoming you are. I love going to a deposition and finding out about something from having to do with my client that I've been dealing with for a year for the first time. It's always great. And the other side knew it, but I didn't, because they didn't think it was important to let me know. It's not a good look. Because among other things, here's the problem. If people don't believe you, it doesn't matter whether you're telling the truth or not. Well, I just messed up on this one thing. I forgot this. But people may take that issue, discern a lack of believability from you, a lack of credibility, and now they won't believe you in the real thing that they really need to believe you in. So how forthcoming you are. Let me be the judge of whether or not what you are saying or what you have to say is relevant for purposes of our case. Particularly if you're really going through it at work, you really have a bunch of stuff happening. You might not know what is and what isn't important because, among other things, you've probably compartmentalized. And some of the things that might be a smoking gun for me, that might really help make the case go off, are things that you've minimized because you've had to put them in the back of your mind. So tell me everything. Good news, bad news. You've got attorney-client privilege. Let's talk about this stuff now as opposed to later, because if we talk about it and find out about it later in front of everybody else, it's just not going to look good. Okay? So, keys to evaluating the case, how well documented you are, how forthcoming you are, and here's the other thing, how believable you are. If I am not buying what you're saying, I cannot sell it. And sometimes it's always fun. I mean, I'm sure it's happened with the other attorneys in the room where you just believe a client, you just sit and listen to a client, and you just say to yourself, you know what, I don't believe a word they say. Not a word. Nothing. Nathan. Okay, it's not happening. I don't believe it at all. Okay? And I have that happen where you have a client and you don't believe them and you know it was a sunny day, but if they come in and they say, you know, it's really sunny today, you walk out with an umbrella because you just don't believe anything. I have that happen sometimes. And here's the other thing. Here's what we do as attorneys and what we ought to do. Most of the time, guys, we trust our instincts. And so when our spidey senses tingle, it's a real thing. Every time I've taken a case, despite the tingling of the spidey senses, I have always regretted it. I always find out that if I thought that the client was lying and for purposes of this case wasn't any good, you might have some social redeeming value, but for the purposes of this case, I don't believe a word you're saying. I never did. You made me feel the wrong way at the very beginning. I'm your fourth lawyer. You know what I mean? There are certain indicia. And the other thing I would say to those that would be watching is, you have to be careful about jumping around from lawyer to lawyer too. Because if you jumped around to 2 or 3 lawyers and you come to me and you tell me you got a great case, but the other 3 lawyers didn't think so, or at least not enough, the thing that all the lawyers have in common is you. So you could be the problem, whether you think so or not. Okay, and so be careful about that. So those are the ways that we evaluate a case: how well documented you are, how believable you are, and how forthcoming you are. And as it pertains to these issues, that's why I ask for chronologies. That's why I ask to have discussions with you so I can take those things, do immediate follow-up questions, and I can understand where we are. Sometimes you have a situation where something is morally wrong, but not necessarily legally wrong. Okay? So we're trying to help the best way that we can. And so please take our advice. You take it with a grain and you can go another way if you want to. But be really, really careful and make sure you're bringing a case for the right reasons. Not because I shouldn't be talking to you in your first conversation and you got fired yesterday and you let me know you want $100,000. Well, what does that connect to, like in reality? Okay? Because I need to know a little bit more about what happened, to know whether you have a recovery at all and what level that might end up being. And your damages are continuing. You have the ability to mitigate. You're supposed to mitigate your damages if you get another job tomorrow. The good news is you got another job tomorrow. The bad news is your case is not as worth as much because you don't have the lost earnings. That just is what it is. Okay? So I think that's all I have for now. And what we'll do is I'll go ahead and do the introduction of my next person. Sis is coming up. Kamala Gray at Chung and Ignacio. She's a fantastic family lawyer. She's an excellent church member, a dear friend, family member practically, talking about some things that help. Family law is very emotional, guys. So hopefully she's able to help you take the emotion out of it and do the things that you need to do. Please do not disregard what we are saying because it's really important, okay? And that's what we need to do.
All right. Well, good morning, and thank you for that introduction, my brother. He always adds an extra, but thank you for having me here, and I'm going to just jump right in for the interest of time, and we're going to talk about a few things about family law, and I'm going to talk about 3 main topics: what's decided in a family law courtroom, some common myths I often hear when I'm doing consultations about family law, and then if time permits, we're going to talk a little bit about Dre. So, what do family law courts, especially family law courts in the Inland Empire, because that's where I practice most of the time, what do we decide? We decide the issues of divorce. We call it a dissolution in California. We decide issues regarding to legal separation, child custody, child support, spousal support, property division, and domestic violence restraining orders. And there's a lot of subsets within that, but those are the major issues that we're dealing with. When you say I need a family law attorney, that's what we normally do. What the family courts do not decide are guardianships. So that's where one or both of the parents are not fit to be parents for a time, so someone else comes in. That's dealt with a different court. Conservatorships, when you have someone over the age of 18 that needs someone else to make decisions for them. We don't do that in the family court. We don't do probate, so if one of your family members passes and we have to handle their estate, that's not done in the family law court. In fact, guardianships, conservatorships, and probates are all handled in the probate court. Family law courts don't necessarily do adoptions. The judicial officer may handle adoptions, but adoptions are handled on their own day, on their own time, in a closed setting. And we also, in family law court, we don't deal with issues of juvenile dependency, which means that there's some sort of mistreatment or some sort of family issue that needs to be helped out by the court, or delinquency when somebody under the age of 18 commits a crime. So, let me tell you a few things that I hear about that causes people to have to come to me after things are done. One of the most important things is you are not automatically divorced 6 months after you file the paperwork. At least once a year, I have somebody that comes in and they're like, oh, I have a wedding scheduled, and they're telling me I'm not divorced. And it's because you are not divorced until you get paperwork from the court that says you've been restored to the status of a single person. So if you're moving on, Make sure you get that paperwork before you try to get married to someone else. Another very common myth is a lot of people think, well, if I live with somebody for a certain number of years, I often hear 7 years, that I am married by common law. There is no common law marriage in the state of California. So there are things that you can do, there are agreements that you can make as single people, but if you don't put it down in writing, you can't get helped in the family law court, and even if you aren't married, your issue goes over to the civil court. Another issue that is really big right now is people say, if I buy something in my own name, it's mine. And it often comes up when people buy houses. In California, if you buy something during the course of your marriage, we automatically think that it's community property. Are there times where it could be different? Yes, but don't just assume just because your name is on it, it's yours. That also applies to retirements as well. Along the same lines, when I get people in, they're like, my spouse ran up all of this credit card debt. Why am I responsible for that? And that's because just like everything that you purchase is considered to be community property, all your debts are considered to be community property. And that's not to say that, you can't get somebody in there to fight for you, fight for your rights, but just consider that you start off with the presumption that that debt is yours. One very big exception is student loans. Student loans usually follow the person that gets those loans. Another thing that would take away from my business, but I'm okay with it, prenuptial agreements are not only for rich people. And there are two reasons why prenuptial agreements are very good. The first is the obvious one. If for some reason your relationship doesn't work out, you have a blueprint for how you're going to divide your assets and how you're going to go your very separate ways. The other thing that's really good about a prenup is it causes the parties to think about what they're doing before they walk down the aisle and they say, I do. Like, let's think about if there's kids that existed before the relationship, how we'll handle those kids, whether those kids will be in our will. How will we deal with our parents? How is our property going to be handled? It kind of makes things a lot easier, a lot cleaner, and it makes sure that the two of you guys are on the same page. In the last 2 years, I've had so many consultations from people that are very COVID conscious. So they have decided that they're going to take care of their kids and they're going to stop all visitation because the other parent is not COVID conscious. And it's not to say that the courts won't believe you. It's just if you haven't gone to the court to seek a modification of your orders, anytime you stop a parent from their court-ordered parenting time, that can create major problems for you in the future. So I would suggest if parents aren't on the same page about how to handle COVID restrictions, you talk about it, but if not, go to the court, ask the court to help you come up with some sort of plan that's in the best interest of your children. Another one I hear all the time, my name is on the birth certificate, so I have the same rights as the other parent. That is true and not true, right? You do have something that says, I am the parent of this child. But if you don't have court orders, and one parent decides, I'm going to keep the kid and I don't want to share the kid, there's nothing that can be done about it. So it's very important that even in good times, you establish some sort of something on paperwork so that you know how you're sharing your children, because without court intervention and something happens and you call the police, there's nothing for them to enforce. Another thing that was happening a lot in the last couple of years because kids were doing distance learning, parents were deciding, I'm going to Arizona for the weekend, I'm going to Oregon, I'm going to Nevada because I get to do it, it's my kids. That's not necessarily something that you can do. If you are engaged in the process of a dissolution or a petition to establish parental relationship, automatically as soon as that paperwork is filed, there's an order that goes into place that says neither parent can take the children out of state without the other parent's permission or a court order. And then in this area, for the majority of agreements that are made or orders that are made from the judge, they usually include a provision that says you can't take the children out of state without the other parent's knowledge. And in some cases, they require that you do it with the parent's consent. This is very important because I have had parties lose custody of their kids because they're just like, I'm going to do what I want to do. It's my kids. It's just a trip that I drove to. But it's really important that you follow the court orders and make sure that you don't take the kids out of state. Here's another one. A lot of people believe that if I have a 50-50 custody, that there's not a child support order. This is false. Not only is it false, you could be a parent who technically spends more time with the children and end up having to pay child support to that other parent. Because California uses this complicated guideline calculator to figure out what the child support number should be. And based on that, which uses the timeshare as part of the factors, the number comes out the way it comes out. I always think about when I was a very young attorney, I had a case where one parent had 90% custody and the other parent had 10%. But the parent that had 90% custody made so much more money than the other parent that parent actually had to pay the other parent $110 a month for child support for them seeing their child. So it's very complicated, but the thing to think about is child support is supposed to be for the children to kind of normalize their lifestyle between the two homes. And it's hard because you always hear someone saying, well, I'm paying the custodial parent the money and they're going out and they're spending money on themselves, making themselves look good, and it's not going towards my kids. But the presumption is that there should be some sort of support for your kids, and that money is for your kids and not necessarily for the other parent. There is also a law out there that says that the court can terminate child support if a parent is alienating, keeping the kids from the parent that's paying support. However, do not stop paying support just because a parent is keeping you from seeing the other kid. A court order remains valid until there's another court order. So if the court hasn't said that the custodial parent is keeping the kids away from the other parent, and therefore you don't have to pay child support, continue paying it because child support is a beast. And when you fail to pay your child support payments on time, it gains interest at a rate of 10%. You can't even put money in a savings account and get interest at a rate of 10%. So that's a pretty stiff penalty. It's very important that you try to stay on top of things when it comes to your child support. So in the last few minutes that we have here, there's been a lot of talk about the divorce of Dr. Dre and Nicole Young. And so just a few of the basics. They were married for 24 years. And prior to marriage, they entered into a prenuptial agreement. And we already know that at the time that Dr. Dre and Nicole Young got married, he already had some assets. He already had some net worth because the days of NWA and all of that were already in place before they got married. But during their marriage, Dre's net worth grew exponentially, right? We all heard about how much he started making. So eventually their marriage didn't work out, and Nicole Young, who's an attorney, decided to file for dissolution of marriage. And she used carefully crafted language to tell the court that the prenup was invalid. She basically said that she was intimidated and forced into signing that prenuptial agreement, which contractually, if you're forced into signing an agreement, it cannot be valid. And then she also said 2 years into the marriage, he felt ashamed that he forced me into signing this prenuptial agreement, so he ripped it up, and both of us agreed that the prenup is no longer valid. So, I mean, I have my thoughts. I'm not privy to the case, but I do believe that because she's an attorney, she carefully crafted that language. But without, if she was correct that he tore it up after 2 years of marriage, then the question becomes, was that prenup valid for 2 years? And then it gets torn up for the remainder of their marriage, the last 22 years. If she's correct, then everything that Dre created, because remember we talked about the community estate, everything he created during that time, does that now have to be divided 50-50? What do we have to go through to figure out what was his separate property before they got married? What is his community property? What is the natural result of all of this? So I think the parties thought about the plan of how to figure out who was entitled to what, the time. Dissolutions are very emotional. Sometimes they take a toll on your financial health. And I think that's why these two parties were able to come to an agreement. So one thing that's important to note is that this court never got the opportunity to rule on whether or not her claims are valid. So that is not one of the issues. But when they came to their settlement, everyone saw Nicole Young gets $100 million. And instantly the thought was, she got $100 million. She made out like a bandit. And don't get me wrong, I would love to get a settlement for $100 million. But let's look at how they ended up in the end. So at the end of the day, Nicole Young gets $100 million. And she's getting that in two payments. She gets $50 million. I believe it was last year that she signed the agreement. She'll get another $50 million this year. She got 4 cars. She got her personal items that Dre put into storage, and she gets no spousal support, which in California, when you have a marriage of longer than 10 years, there's a presumption that you're supposed to get spousal support for life. Now, let's look at what Dre got. Based on the paperwork at the time, Dre was worth $800 million. So he still keeps $700 million. He keeps 7 properties. He keeps his master recordings, his trademarks, his interest in all his various partnerships and trusts, all of the Apple stocks, and all of the proceeds from Beats by Dre. And one of the reasons why that is so important, especially when we talk about the master recordings and the trademarks, is those are assets that build income in the future. So Dre can continue to rebuild and make more money while Nicole's interest in all of that stops at this point. He also got 6 cars. So in looking at this, the question is, how did they do from where they started to where they finished? My opinion is they both came out okay. You know, because Dre ran the risk of her getting a whole lot more than $100 million. If the court said Nicole was right, and, you know, not to be too personal, but by calling her by her first name, but if she was right, he stood ground for paying her almost $400 million and 3 of the properties, or selling all of his properties, and 5 of the 10 cars, and having to be tied to her forever because she's into his interest. And I would be very happy to get $100 million in my cars, you know. So I think from the outside looking in, this is one of those settlements that I wish that a lot of my clients would look at and basically say sometimes it's better to buy your peace and be done with each other and just move on. And so that's all I have for us this morning, and thank you for having us here.
But I want to thank Kamala for speaking. Family law can be very, very emotional, and it's really important to be able to take feelings out of it, and that's really important. I am really glad we have a prosecutor this time around. We've had a public defender a couple times, and the prosecutors do a great service to the community as well. And people that are dedicated to the community, that are connected to the community, and that understand the community. I guess just like anything else, if you're on the wrong side of a prosecutor or wrong side of a public defender, or whatever else, you might feel a certain way about it. But this is something that our tax dollars pay for, and these are some of the most experienced and tried and true attorneys out there. So I'm thrilled to bring up Jocelyn Pulliam, who has been with the Riverside County DA for many years. Is somebody that's community connected and community dedicated, and she's going to be talking about the DA's office and victims' rights. So, Jocelyn, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Joe, for those kind words. And I would just like to preface and say, as a district attorney, our job is not about locking people up. Although sometimes it is, depending on what you then did. But that's not all that we do. And what I'm going to do today is basically give you an overview of cases and how they get filed at the district attorney's office. And in doing so, I'm going to tell you about some resources for victims of crimes that you may not be aware of. Now, I want to preface by saying I'm speaking in general terms. I'm not here representing a specific case or to talk about any specific jurisdiction. Everything I'm telling you is general information, and every DA's office handles things differently, but the functionality is similar between all of them. So if you've had the unfortunate circumstance of being a victim of a crime, I myself have, you often wonder, if you report that crime and the police get involved, what happens when it goes to the DA's office? Well, first, just to tell you, the police, they write a police report, take down statements, things of that nature. Then what they do is they'll submit a report to the DA's office. And when we get that report, what we do is we take an independent review of that report, and we then decide if we feel there's evidence that a crime was committed. And I'll tell you, even though we work hand in hand with law enforcement, we don't always agree. So sometimes the police can be very zealous, arrest someone, submit a report, and all excited and gung-ho about someone possibly getting prosecuted, and they'll bring the report to us, and we may look at it and say, nah, nope, we don't think a crime was committed. Sometimes we may think a crime was committed, but there's not enough evidence to prosecute. And sometimes when that happens, if you're a victim of a crime, you may not become aware of that right away. And normally what happens is when we're reviewing cases and we're trying to figure out if a crime was committed, and secondly, if there's enough evidence to prove that in a court of law beyond a reasonable doubt, if we don't have that at the initial stages, then that case can get rejected and flat out not filed. Or sometimes we can send that case back and tell the police agency to do further investigation. And we know everyone's busy, overworked, and understaffed. So unique to the DA's office is that we have our own set of internal investigators who also assist us with collecting evidence on cases and helping us in the initial stages in filing cases. Now, if you're a victim of a crime, sometimes we hear victims say, well, I know the police were called out, I know a report was sent to the DA's office, but we don't want to file charges, or we don't want the case to proceed. And it's a common myth that if a victim doesn't want prosecution or want the case to proceed, they can call us up and say drop the charges. And oftentimes we have to tell people that's not how it works. Unfortunately, once a crime is reported and it comes to the DA's office, if we feel there's evidence to support that crime and that we can prove it in a court of law, we can proceed even if the victim doesn't want prosecution, even if they change their mind later on. And this happens quite frequently. Most of the time I see it in like domestic violence type cases where a victim reports an incident and later on they have a change of heart and they don't want their partner to be prosecuted. And we have to tell them it's out of your hands once it gets to us. And we will proceed on that case with or without them. And it's different, I want to tell you, in different jurisdictions. Because I know in our more liberal areas up north, sometimes some of those offices, if the victim doesn't want to participate or doesn't want prosecution, sometimes they'll say, well, they don't want to deal with the headache, and they'll just let the case go. But down here in Southern California, particularly in the Inland Empire, we'll proceed without you. Now, once a case does get filed, just so you know, the DA's office and not the police determine what the charges should be. And also, we're the ones who make initial offers and decide things like what we think a person's punishment, if the case is deserving of punishment, should be. But some things that you should know if you are the victim of a crime is that if it's a crime involving violence or a serious offense, you can get what's assigned what's called a victim rights advocate assigned to you. And sometimes victims are not aware of this, but it's a person who's basically like a liaison between the victim and the DA. And a victim rights advocate, normally what they do is talk to the victims. They do practical things like talk to the victims about coming to court, educate them on the process of when you have to testify. They help them with logistic things, where the courthouse is, what to wear to court, when to be in court. And they also go a step further if victims don't have a way to court. And this applies to victims and witnesses. Our advocates will go out, pick them up, bring them to court, take them back home. Sometimes we have victims who are homeless. Our advocates will get them clothes if they need it for court. We'll put them up in temporary housing while proceedings are pending if it's a hearing where they need to testify at. And advocates can help with things like if victims need food, like providing meal vouchers. They also can help with other resources. And these are things that victims of crime may not be aware of because the police agencies don't normally tell them about it. And unless you contact the DA's office or we contact you, you may not be aware. A unique new program that they've started in the Inland Empire in the past couple of years is having support advocates who are actually canine victim support animals. And these are our four-legged friends who have served their time normally helping with police agencies and they're in retirement mode. They come over to the DA's office and they get a second lease on life. And what they do is sometimes when we have, for example, child victims or victims who have PTSD or who are really afraid about coming to court or the whole process, we'll introduce them to the canine support animals and we'll have them interact with that animal over the course of weeks or months to help them feel comfortable about coming to court. And our canine friends, they will often sit with a victim while they're testifying in court on the stand on matters. Another thing we hear from victims and witnesses is that they don't have to show up to court if they've received a subpoena. And that also is a myth. I get angry calls all the time. I got a subpoena, but I'm not coming. And I tell them all the time, if someone handed you that subpoena, that piece of paper is a court order. And there's a lot of power behind it. And I often tell them, whether you want to or not, you need to abide by that subpoena and at least show up to court. Now, when you get there, nobody can make you talk, nobody can make you do anything, but you're going to have to show up. And I often tell people, if you don't show up, then that paper, the power behind it, can cause you to get some handcuffs put on you if you don't abide by it. So if you're a victim or witness and you're served with a subpoena, show up to court. Now, while your case is moving through the court process, victims have a right to be involved along the way. But when we're talking about things like punishment and case resolutions, sometimes victims may feel like they're not given a full voice. And that's because when we're resolving cases and doing negotiations, sometimes the DA doesn't directly involve the victim. And I want you to know that in California in recent years, there have been a lot of changes to our criminal justice system and how cases get handled. And it's not like it was before where you saw people getting decades and a lot of years in prison for nonviolent offenses or for drug offenses. Nowadays, the majority of the people who serve long prison sentences are people who get convicted of child molestation, murder, very serious and violent offenses. Recent changes in the law for people who are eligible for probation. And these are people who are not going to prison, but for misdemeanor offenses, where you're looking at a year or less in county jail. Previously, you used to be able to be on probation for up to 3 years. The laws have changed, and now if you have a misdemeanor conviction, you only serve probation for 1 year. And for felony offenses, where it used to be up to 3 years or more, your probation is now only 2 years. And this doesn't apply to crimes that are serious or violent. Okay? But low-level felony offenses, minor offenses, the probation time has been greatly reduced. Also, sometimes victims may want to know, well, the defendant has admitted that they committed a crime. Why aren't they in jail? And sometimes what we've been seeing is that for certain types of defendants, there's been a shift in how their cases get resolved. And we've seen more DA offices working collaboratively with the courts, defense attorneys, social service agencies like like Veterans Affairs or behavioral health, and trying to help people who've committed crimes get treatment versus incarceration. And I'm going to highlight a couple of those programs. Some of the programs that we offer that are in lieu of a person actually getting incarceration time is mental health court. And that's a particular court that's designed for people who have a diagnosed disorder or mental disease that was a contributing factor to their criminal activity. And in a mental health court, instead of a person getting punishment, what we do is offer mental health treatment to try to help them so that they don't come back and reoffend. Along those lines, we have another program called Veterans Court. And that's for any veteran or active duty military person who's been discharged. And normally we only take honorable discharge, but in certain situations they'll take a dishonorable discharge from the military. And if that person committed a crime and it relates to some type of disorder, mental health condition, psychological issue that they obtained while in the military or is connected to their military service, then they can also receive treatment in lieu of incarceration. Another program we offer is the diversion program. And that's a program where instead of going through the normal criminal justice system, a person can do alternative programs like anger management or get treatment. And when they're done with that program, their case gets completely dismissed. And even though the majority of the drug crimes now are not crimes, are there misdemeanors, we do still offer drug treatment programs for people who committed offenses that are connected to a drug addiction. And the benefit of all these programs I mentioned is that if the person successfully completes it, they not only avoid incarceration, but they have their cases completely dismissed. Another program that is new to the Inland Empire area is the Homeless Court program. And that's a program that was implemented a couple years ago to try to help homeless defendants clear up their cases. A lot of times with the homeless, they'll pick up cases daily for things like drunk in public, trespassing, low-level minor infractions, starting fires to try to keep warm, and things of that nature. So they've implemented homeless court where they'll have judges actually go out sometimes to shelters, or they'll have special sessions where homeless people can come in and have those minor violations cleared up off their record. So there's been a lot of changes in how we handle certain types of defendants. And victims may sometimes wonder why they're not in custody, but if they meet these certain conditions, then we think that this is a better alternative than just putting someone in custody and them getting out and repeating that behavior. Now, when we are evaluating whether or not someone should receive custody time or incarceration versus treatment, we still consider public safety, and we also consider the impact on a victim. Now, what are a victim's rights when it comes to that process? I'm going to highlight a couple of them for you. When a defendant is being considered for one of the programs I mentioned, for example, if you're a victim of a crime, you have the right to come to court and be heard about whether or not that person should be allowed to enter that program. You have a right to be present at all the proceedings and to see and hear what's going on that case. And I want to just say that sometimes people think that because they're a victim, they don't have any power. But I tell victims all the time, sometimes what you say in court has more power and influence than what I say, because the judges see me all the time and they hear my mouth all the time. And when a victim comes in and they talk about how something has affected them, it does have power. And sometimes it can actually affect what a judge does on a case. Sometimes a person may or may not be able to get into a program based on the impact that they've had on the victim and what that victim represents when they come to court. But if you are the victim of a crime, one of the rights that you have is what's called Marsy's Law. And that's known as the California Victims' Bill of Rights, which was established in 2008. And what that law does is it gives victims of crime about 17 constitutional rights. And they're listed in our state constitution under Article 1, Section 28B. But just to highlight the most common ones, as I mentioned, it gives you a right to be heard and present in court. It also allows for you to have return of property, property that may have been confiscated by the police during an investigation. Sometimes we'll have cases, and cases we know through our system it does not move fast. Cases take months, sometimes years to get resolved. And sometimes victims will have very important property, money, cars, phones, computers, things that law enforcement took as part of their investigation. And before victims have to wait until the whole case was over, no matter how many months or years it took to get that property back, if at all. But under Marsy's Law, they can petition the court to have property returned to them. It also entitles a victim to receive notification when a case is over and if a defendant is incarcerated, if that person is up for parole. And that's really important because victims now have the right to be present and to give statements at parole hearings on their opinion about whether or not someone should be released from prison. They also have the right to receive notification if parole is granted, even if it's years and years after the case is over. Marsy's Law is really important because when a case is being resolved, we oftentimes cannot even sentence a defendant unless we've given a victim the right to be heard. And if a victim says they want to be present or make a statement, then we have to wait. We have to wait for them before we can proceed with the case. Also, as the DA's office, we're tasked with locating victims. So when I told you those cases take years and months to resolve, if we've lost contact with a victim, we have to actually try and find that person to let them know that the case is going to be resolving. One of the other big rights that a victim has is the right to restitution, basically to be made whole again. And restitution applies whether or not a defendant is in custody, out of custody, on probation, or receives a prison sentence. Sometimes I'll have victims say, well, if they had an economic loss, they often ask, am I ever going to see any money? The defendant's going off to prison. What does it matter? And I tell them, it matters. Because even though a defendant may be in prison, they earn anywhere from, on the low end, 14 cents a day up to, I believe, $2 a day. And that's very low money in the real world. But a victim is entitled to that money. So if someone's in prison earning money, any money they earn, a portion of that gets paid to victims if they've requested restitution. And when that person gets out, I think it was a few years ago in the news that someone had went to prison, they owed restitution, and I think they got out and won the lottery. Guess what? Because the victim had a restitution order, they got that money. So it's very important, and I tell victims, don't think, oh, this person doesn't have the ability to pay now, I'll just let it go. Don't let it go. Some of the things you can receive restitution for are, of course, any out-of-pocket expenses, economic loss. If you've been physically injured, that can include medical bills, things of that nature. But you can also receive restitution for things like lost wages from work as well. Lastly, one of the other rights that victims have that they may not be aware of is under the California Victims Compensation Board. It's a government-funded program that provides immediate financial assistance to victims of crimes. And it typically applies to victims who've had some type of emotional or mostly physical injury resulting from some type of crime of violence. And what that board does is it will pay out money to a victim while the case is going on, before it gets resolved, and even after a case gets resolved and the person gets convicted. And I tell victims about this because sometimes in our most serious cases, like murder cases, we'll have families call up crying because their loved one has been killed and they don't know how they're going to bury them. Well, the Victims Compensation Board pays thousands of dollars to help bury people. Other things that the board pays for are therapy, treatment. The board also will cover things like if, say for example, your home was burglarized and you were home when it happened. You still live in that house, you don't feel safe. They'll pay to have a security system installed in your home. They'll pay to have cameras installed. If you need to move or relocate because of a crime, the compensation board will pay to move you and your family to a new home. They also offer things like crime scene cleanup. Unfortunately, in some violent crimes, there may be a bloody crime scene. When the police are done, they don't clean up that blood, they just leave. It's up to the homeowner, the person who lives there, to have to deal with that mess. They also pay for things like service animals. They also cover things like lost wages. And they provide support for legal dependents if their parent or guardian was the victim of a serious crime. So they provide a lot of resources for people who need immediate assistance. And all it takes is just filling out an application, being a California resident, or the crime occurred in California if you're not a resident, and you can submit that application at any time within 7 years of that crime occurring. So it doesn't even have to be right away. It can be after the fact, and that money is there. So basically, in conclusion, I want you to know we're not here just to lock people up. And if you are the victim of a crime, just know we are here to help you, and there are resources available for you. Thank you.
All right, a couple things real fast. First of all, thank you, Jocelyn. That was incredible. I mean, actually, to be honest with you, I didn't know about a lot of it. I think I did know about the Victims Compensation Fund because I had that happen with a family member that was killed, and that helped. I remember that. But that was, that gives you another aspect to know that there are things out there and resources out there for victims. I think that's really important. I wanted to take a moment to mention a couple of the questions that we've gotten that came in for people that had reserved, and some of them are out of the wheelhouse of the specific areas of law, but just things that you can kind of take with you. I had someone mention that they cut their hand on a store refrigerator, and what can they present in court as reasons for damages? I don't work in state insurance pays my medical bills. As a general statement in personal injury, I used to do personal injury, don't do it so much now, but we do have in a department. Corey Weck runs our department. You can always get in contact with us and get more questions answered in that regard. But when you have a personal injury, there are two components of damages: compensatory damages and non-compensatory damages. Some people call them special damages and general damages. I like to call them tangible damages and intangible damages. Tangible things are the ones that you can touch: my lost earnings, my medical bills, etc. Intangible, pain and suffering, and those types of things. So there still can be a component of pain and suffering that figures in. But to the point, if your medical bills are already paid, then that's not necessarily a damage. And that agency that paid those bills will actually probably seek reimbursement as well. But call a personal injury lawyer. You can call us and get more information in that regard. I had someone say, how do we properly stand as man, woman, real living in protection of our God-given rights versus the legal, quote, person, individual fiction in the current COVID use shifts to control, force, coerce our actions? I'll stop you there to say that not all of us are about control as it pertains to COVID. And I think that there's a legal aspect of things and there's a moral aspect to things. And so I would, if I were you, respectfully probably reframe that. But the place to deal with control is to get an agency that has that mission. There are people out there that want to do things on behalf of people that feel like COVID things are too onerous and that type of thing. So I'd say find one. But, respectfully, I say that's certainly not me. I've had a lot of people call me and ask about that. And that's not where, not where I want to be. The new CDC directive, if a non-positive staff member does not feel comfortable having COVID positive peers walking around the workplace, how do you suggest it be handled? I guess that connects to the idea that they've said that even with positive tests, if someone after 5 days is okay, then they can go back to work. Again, that's a discussion we've talked a little bit about the law, where some things stand with certain types of employers. But I think that's a discussion with the boss and with the workplace. There's going to be some tension for those of us that don't necessarily agree so much with the medical directives. I can't always help you with that because that might signify a larger issue. But there's always the matter of potentially asking for an employee accommodation, going through the good faith interactive process. There's no guarantee out of that. But again, if you have a good relationship of seed planning with your employer, you might be able to get something done in that regard, particularly if your work could be done remotely or something like that. So those are a few of those real fast. I don't want to get too deep in that. But next, from the San Bernardino County Department of Behavioral Health, Jonathan Buffon was here with us. He helped do our first event, I believe, about a year ago. And this is really, really important when we're talking about behavioral health. We're talking about mental health because a lot of folks, particularly people of color, can I be real? We like to say when someone goes and gets help for mental health that you're crazy. We like to, make it into something other than what it is. But let's go with that example just for a moment, real fast, and I'll bring Jonathan right up. Let's say you were crazy and you didn't go and get help. You'd still be crazy. I make it as a point because, first of all, I'm not really talking about you being crazy. What I'm talking about is you needing help. It's okay to need help. Everybody needs help on some level. COVID has got a lot of us in a place as it pertains to mental health, and we have got to take care of ourselves, okay? And we should not penalize those that step out to take care of themselves. Jonathan does excellent work. He's going to be talking about prioritizing mental health for you and your loved ones, which you should do despite what other people may say. You have to take care of yourself, mind, body, and spirit. And I love this because after him, Brother McCance is going to come up from the Floyd Mayweather gym. So we're doing mental health and physical health, getting your mind and your body right. Jonathan, come on up. Thank you, sir, for being here. Appreciate it.
All right. I love the introduction. I love the honesty and the bluntness. And I'll start it off right off. We all have mental health problems. That's just what it is. You may not have an issue. You may not have a diagnosis, but you got mental health problems. Even if you're just driving on the freeway and somebody cuts you off and you're thinking about that for the rest of the day, that can create a mental health problem, and we all have to know how to deal with it. So in this short amount of time that I'll have with you, I'm going to talk about what our office does. I'll talk about some of the hot topics that we've been dealing and talking about when it comes to behavioral health. We call behavioral health because it includes our mental health and substance abuse. And then I'll talk about a really fantastic new program that we've launched in the last couple of months. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. So once again, I'm Jonathan. I am a mental health education consultant. I get a chance to go out into the community as well as work with a lot of different cultural groups to talk about mental health, behavioral health services, how to connect them, but more importantly, deal with the stigma issues. People have issues with mental health. We have traditionally had issues. Families have issues. Individuals have issues. And so we have to get over some of those things. And depending on what culture you're from, some of them are extremely negative. Others are kind of neutral, and a few of them are positive, especially if you know where the resources are and you know how to deal with them. But for my culture, I represent African American Black folks. My parents are from the Caribbean. Mental health isn't something that's talked about at all. Coming up, either you kind of kept it quiet, and you had Uncle Joe, and he kind of lived up in the attic or in the basement, depending on where that was, kind of fed him some food and kept it quiet and kept it pushing. But that is not the appropriate way to deal with mental health. So we talk about you need to get professional help if it starts to affect your ability to live, love, and laugh. Your ability to have the basic functions of living, your ability to have relationships, and your ability that affects your job. If any of those things starting to happen and your mental health is starting to affect those things, you should probably get some help. All right, so I work for the Office of Equity and Inclusion. Our office is over a lot of creating policy to make sure that culture is respected, cultural competence training is given to our staff, that we are including individuals of differences in our policies, as well as we deal with a lot of the language service stuff, system of care navigations, and we embed culture in everything that we do, okay? What our goal is to take agencies, organizations, and groups from one group of cultural, either pre-competence, cultural blindness, or incapacity, and move them up to the point where they are culturally competent. We do that by a lot of training. We do that by getting individuals to understand a lot of their biases, getting folks to understand that everybody has a story, cultural story, personal story, a family story, and to listen to that story and then be able to identify how that story relates to whatever the issue that we're dealing in. And it's been very, very successful. A lot of our groups, when I say groups, we're talking about not just ethnic specific groups like African American, Asian Pacific Islander, and Latino. We're talking about groups in the veterans community, folks that have disabilities, folks that in the faith-based community. We all have different levels of stigma, so we engage with them and try and figure out ways to make behavioral health a part of their language and understanding so that we can connect them to the programs that can help them. Here are our 14 cultural groups. You can see them. We meet once a month. Right now we're doing it virtually. In those groups, they're all very different on how they address mental health. Some of them are very upfront and say, okay, we need to have a worship day where our spirituality subcommittee, where we just say it's Mental Health Sunday. We have a mental health speaker. We talk about mental health. We bring out ribbons. We bring out resources, and it's all about mental health. Other groups are a little bit more not as up in front of your face, and they're saying, okay, well, maybe we just need to have a resource day where we have a Saturday where folks can come down and talk to someone who's a professional, social work, and see what's going on. It just all depends. We try and be as competent and do some things that make sense to those community groups as much as possible. So let me talk about what have been specifically for our African American folks and our ethnic groups, what has been the major hot topics and the points of concern. First one has actually had to do with grief. A lot of folks have lost a lot of folks in the last 2 years, and our traditional ways of dealing with that are usually to have a service. It's usually be around family. It's usually to be around people where we can celebrate the life, commemorate, console each other, and support each other. But in this times of isolations, we just haven't had that freedom. In fact, we've been pushed away from having large audiences. And so people have been, especially our community, African American community, and Pacific Islander, because they do a large, a very cultural celebration where the whole community comes together, robbing them of that opportunity. They've had to deal with it in many other ways. And we are very, very purposeful in giving them what are some of the best self-care ways of dealing with the grief. It's not necessarily through drinking. It's not going to be necessarily through taking drugs. It's not going to be through risk-taking. It is by celebrating and finding ways where you can either on the phone or virtually connect with people to have conversations about that person's life. If you don't have it, then there turns to be an internal struggle, and folks can move into our next stage, which is a feeling of isolation and depression. That has been huge over the last 2 years because we've been recommending folks not be around people. So what we've been looking at is what are some ways where we can be healthy and still be safe. And doing basic stuff, my man's going to talk about physical activity, but taking walks has been such a very powerful tool for a lot of our community members who weren't doing that before, and doing some basic exercise, getting the physical workout and helping them actually deal with their mental health issues of grief, isolationism, and depression has been extremely helpful. Getting them into routines where they can look at ways where they can set their day, where they have patterns and they have something to do. They're not just sitting watching the TV. They're not just sitting staring out the window. We've got to get people moving and got to people activated. The third aspect that we've been talking a lot about has been the social media. So while people are sitting at home, they're sitting on Instagram looking at the wonderful lives of everybody else and getting more and more depressed, saying, that's not me. And we have got to get to grips with folks understanding how to use social media. Number two, also understanding what's the difference between a fact and opinion. Some people take so much of what they see as on social media and run with it. And we're not talking about children. We're talking about grown adults who have not gone through an understanding of how to decipher what possibly is slanted and what could be an actual information that I can take to the bank. And so what we as a community have to do is continue to have conversations to really express that social media should be a tool, but it is not necessarily a reality. And with social media being so prevalent and moving into different spheres of augmented reality and virtual reality, it is more pressing than ever to get parents and folks in classes so that they can identify when social media can become an addiction and when it can be a negative issue for their health and their mental health. So that is a key component. We ask folks to have a time lane of how much time is good to be on social media. And I say that, but I also know I can get lost 2 hours just scrolling down. I'm not on TikTok. I'm still just an Instagram and Facebook guy, but I've seen my wife go for 2 to 3 hours in bed just going through TikTok. And I'm like, what is going on? But this is a reality of what our reality is. I have a kindergartner, and he was given a computer at the age of kindergarten, and that is how he does his work, and that is also his reality on how he's going to be doing his work. So with that, a level of responsibility is going to be having to be taught to us as community members, so we can teach it to all those who are around us. So let me tell you a little bit about a program that I think is extremely beneficial. We at the Department of Behavioral Health have partnered with the Inland Empire Concerned African American Churches. And the focus is to increase their mental health ministries. The goal is for them to be able to identify, be able to see the symptoms and signs of what could potentially be a mental health issue so that they, at their level, can be able to resource them to a level wherever is needed. So some of it may just be some low-level counseling. Others may mean I need to see a professional, a social worker, a psychologist, but at the church level, where a lot of trusted community members go to find answers to their questions. They may think that they're physical conditions, but they're actually mental and behavioral health conditions. But having individuals who are trained, who are connected, and who are able to help folks has been our goal. So we've been working with over 15 different churches. If you want to know more about that information, I can definitely get it to you. But we started off talking about crisis and crisis intervention. And we work with a group called the CIT team in the Department of Behavioral Health. They are the ones that train our law enforcement on how to deal with crisis, from individuals that might be having an episode to those that might be human trafficked, other folks that might have autism. And all of these different things that they're not necessarily trained in the academy, we also have given that information to our community faith-based leaders to be able to know how to resource to the various and the specific organizations and services. So that is one of the most outstanding programs we've seen. We're going to hopefully we can expand that program, but we're going to keep moving on with that. And then finally, some of the other things we've been doing is we've been working hand in hand with public health. We were there early to talk about, you know what, some of our communities will have some hesitancy talking about this vaccine. So we've been trying to help them with the messaging. We've been doing a Tri-County Community Partnership, UCR Center for Social Innovations. We've been doing a lot of video interpretation work with our various other departments in the county. We've been working on equity when it comes to the vaccines and rolling out to making sure that all of the community groups get what they need. And then we've been working on population health management. So those are a little bit of the wrap up. If there's any questions or any ways that you want to connect with me, I'll make sure you have my information. But just remember, we all have mental health issues. The issue is if it gets to the point where it starts to affect our family life, starts to affect our relation, our career life, we need to help self-check ourselves in and continue to look for the signs and symptoms of depression, anxiety, before it goes into something that could be bigger. The earlier you are able to intervene, the better the outcome is when it comes to behavioral health and mental health. Thank you for this time.
All right, guys, thank you so much to Jonathan. I'm telling you, again, it's one of those things. I mean, just be confirmed if you get into it with somebody and you're getting ready to potentially catch a case. That's a mental health issue. You know what I mean? If you get impatient and you're at Costco and you got somebody elderly in front of you and you get insensitive and you say, I wonder what would happen if I just push them, would they just tip over? That could be a mental health issue. That's not good. That puts your family through a bunch of stuff. That's not good. So it's important to demystify and let folks know that it's demystify these issues, let folks know that it's okay to need help, and we all do. And let's do what we can to help each other, and starts with helping ourselves. So last but not least, I'm very intentional about closing with Darius McCants because hopefully you've got it in your mind that you want to get your mind right. And a big part of getting your mind right is getting your body right. I've gotten to the point where you get a little bit older and you understand things don't work like they used to. And, back before you're 30 and have a job sitting down, it didn't matter what you ate. Now it matters what you eat. Now it matters that you get up and move around. It always did. But when you're younger in life, maybe those things are a little bit easier to do. But I love the idea of closing with information on physical health. Darius is a trainer at the Floyd Mayweather gyms. Mayweather Boxing and Fitness. It's actually right here in Cucamonga, even though they're all over the country, all over Southern California as well. This is the first one in the Inland Empire, and he's key to the success of that spot there. And so we're going to have him come up and talk about physical health. Darius, thank you so much for being here, brother. I appreciate it.
So yeah, I am Darius. I'm the head coach over at Mayweather Boxing and Fitness in Rancho. Today I will be talking about physical health and just really the importance and how we can take control of our physical health. So most times when we see physical health or we think of physical health, we envision a bodybuilder or some type of model or, things like that. But the reality of physical health is that it's really an outfit that's different on everyone. All right. So it's really just about how you treat your body and what you do for yourself to improve your physical health. Okay. So what is physical health? Physical health is just really the health of your body when it comes to your internal organs, your skin, your mind, and other components like your energy. Okay. And the way that we can control our physical health is through three main factors, which is our sleep, and how we sleep, how well we sleep, our intake, which is really what we eat, drink, and also what we breathe. Now, we don't really have much control over the air that we breathe outside, but that is one factor. And then also our exercise and what we do to stay active, okay? So today what we'll be going over is each one of those components and and what we can do to improve. All right, as being in the fitness industry for the time that I've been, I've learned that one of the biggest things to success is adding to our daily regimen. Okay, and so through this whole process, I want to give you guys tips and tricks to add to your daily regimen to help improve your physical health as opposed to taking it away. All right, when we think of getting in shape or taking care of our physical health, many people think of, I'm going to go on a strict diet, I'm going to work out every single day, I'm going to do this, I won't do this anymore, and 9 times out of 10 that causes you to be unsuccessful because you're taking away some of the things that you love, and a lot of those things there's an emotional attraction to. Okay, so one thing that I'm trying to help and I want to inspire you guys to do is add some of the tips and the things that I'll be showing you guys today into your daily regimen. All right, so we're going to start off with sleep. Now, a healthy sleep pattern, there's many benefits to a healthy sleep pattern, and a healthy sleep pattern is really just anywhere from 6 to 9 hours of sleep a night. Now, that's different based off of the person and your daily activity. If you're a high-level athlete, you should be getting around 8 to 9 hours of sleep. If you have an office job and you're not too active, anywhere from 6 to 7 hours of sleep will be good and a healthy pattern for you. All right, but a good sleep pattern, it boosts your immune system. You know, right now with COVID, that's very important, is to make sure our immune system is working very well, okay? So with boosting your immune system, when you sleep, that's when your body is given the time to really fight against any diseases or anything that has came your way, all right, to protect you. It also helps prevent weight gain. And really one of the main reasons that it helps you prevent weight gain is because when you are awake for longer periods of time, your body begins to release these hormones, these hunger hormones that make you feel as though you want to eat. And so you then intake more calories than your body actually needs for that day. And last but not least, it improves your memory, your mental focus, and your productivity. Okay, I'm sure we've all experienced when we have a good night's rest, the next day, we have all the energy in the world. The day is just going so well. We just feel good, right? Things to stay away from, all right? There's quite a few on here. I may not go through all of them. But one, drinking before bed, you know, it may get you drowsy enough to go to sleep. But 9 times out of 10, but a few hours later, you're up all over again, you know. Sometimes you're actually throwing up, you know. So you want to... You want to make sure that you try not to drink any alcohol before bed, okay? Screen time. Now, this is a very important one because the screens are a big portion of our life and the way we live these days. And so screen time really basically just classifies the time that you spend on watching TV, on your laptops, and on your cell phones, okay? Now, though we need them for our daily lives, there's blue light in all of the screens that can cause your brain to be overactive throughout the night. So your body will not allow your body to get into that deep REM cycle of sleep and to repair itself in the way that it should. Okay, so there's different tools out there. There's things like blue light blockers, so there's glasses that you can buy. If you don't need prescription glasses, you can go to a Walgreens, any type of pharmacy. They're about $15, all right, and it'll block that blue light. So while you are doing your work on the computer or on your phone, it won't have the same effect as it would without them. But they advise to make sure that you take about 2 to 3 hours before bedtime with no screens. Okay, and so what I like to do is I like to turn everything off, and from there I'm just planning out my day for the next day. So I'll write out my plan with no screen. I'll actually use a pad and a pen and actually write it down. I know that's pretty ancient these days, but yeah, it's very effective, and you'll feel a better quality of sleep. Eating full meals. Many people believe there's different beliefs on eating full meals before bed. The biggest the biggest negative about eating full meals before bed is that your body you kickstart your metabolism, and so now your body is working throughout your sleep to to burn off all the calories that you just took in, okay? So really going to bed, you really want your body to be as relaxed as possible. So with this, you want to make sure that you really minimize the amount of food that you eat before bed, or take about an hour to 2 hours before going to bed with no food, okay? That doesn't mean to starve yourself with dinner, okay? You still want to eat dinner, all right? just take about an hour to 2 hours before going to bed afterwards, okay? Drinking too much water is really self-explanatory. You're gonna wake up throughout the night having to use the restroom, all right? And then last but not least, staying in bed after waking up. Now, it doesn't really seem like a problem, but when you stay in bed for too long, your body begins to build this inertia, and that inertia then causes you to lose a lot of the energy throughout your day. So it decreases your productivity throughout the day. All right, you'll feel a little lazier, you feel a little more tired with small things that you have to get done, okay? Moving forward, we're going into intake, all right? Now, again, like I said earlier, intake is really what we eat, drink, and breathe, okay? Now, I want to give you guys things to add to what you are already doing. Please don't leave here or stop watching this video and think I'm not gonna eat any red meat anymore, any pork, I'm not gonna do this, all right? My goal is to get you to add these 3 key components to your diet and to increase them, okay? And that is water, whole grains, and veggies, okay? So starting off with water, really, you should be getting anywhere from at least half a gallon to a gallon of water a day, okay? To really feel good. And now really what water does, it helps you detoxify your body, okay? So it's like a daily detox. The more water that you receive, the better your blood will flow through your body, the more oxygen that you will have, okay? It also kickstarts your metabolism. They say that if you drink up to about 17 to 24 ounces in the morning when you wake up, it will kickstart your metabolism up for about 24%. So your metabolism will be 24% more effective throughout your day. All right, so when you wake up in the morning, try to have a couple glasses of water or a bottle of water as you start your day. Now, whole grains. Whole grains really consist of oatmeal, quinoa, brown rice, just to name a few. And really the biggest thing about whole grains is it supports a fiber-rich diet. Okay, and the more fiber you have, the easier it is for your digestive system to get rid of all the waste in your body. Okay, so basically the fiber lines up that digestive system, so the waste has a smooth transition right on out of your body. So if you have any issues with constipation or just any issues with, getting that waste out on a daily basis, having a fiber-rich diet will help, okay? And last but not least, fruits and veggies. Now, like I said before, when we think about eating healthy, everybody thinks like, oh, I'm just gonna eat salads all throughout my day. Well, that is one of the worst things you can do because your body still needs the carbs, your body still needs the protein, okay? And when you do that, you're taking those things out of your diet. So, but what you do want to do is add more of these things. So add more fruits and more veggies, all right? You should be getting at least 6 servings of each throughout your day. So a snack with fruit, snack with vegetables. If you're craving sweets, most times when you're craving sweets and you're craving candy, I'm a big candy guy, all right? When you're craving these things, it's because your body is lacking in those natural sugars, which is really the fruit, right? But what we believe is this candy, okay? So if you're craving candy, you want to actually take in more fruits throughout your day, okay? And it helps to support your immune system. And with everything going on right now with COVID, that's one of the number one things. Whatever I can do to keep myself safe and keep my family safe is very important for me, all right? It's high in vitamins and minerals and the essential vitamins that your body needs. All right, food is best. I know we always take multivitamins, and multivitamins are good, don't get me wrong, but it's always best to get those vitamins from your food, okay? Now, let's go into exercise. All right, now, exercise, man. Exercise is just really getting active, all right? And just taking the time throughout your day to really thank your body for even getting you through the day, all right? And so exercise, if you think of it as thanking your body and really taking care of it, it'll be a lot easier for you. Now, I have benefits under each, but the effects and the benefits of exercise is really consistent across the board. And you can do many things for exercise. You can do cardio, which can consist of running. It can consist of walking. You can do sports, all right, which is you can do baseball, soccer. As you already know, I'm the head coach at the boxing gym, so you can learn boxing. And then weightlifting. Also yoga. Those are all really good ways to exercise and get active. Okay, now really with exercise, it strengthens your heart. Okay, so it's like a workout for your heart. Your heart needs to get stronger so that it can pump the oxygen throughout the rest of your body, which is why when you start running or you're walking, you start to feel that your heart rate will increase. Okay, it helps your immune system, and that's one of the things that has been proven through COVID. You know, everybody has their ideas of if the vaccine works or anything like that, but one thing that has been proven to be successful is that if you have a healthy workout regimen and your heart is strong, it will help the effects of COVID. It won't help protect you from getting it completely, but your effects, the symptoms that you will have will be not as severe. Okay. Sports. Now, if you're practicing sports, it's a fun way to stay active. So it doesn't feel like a chore now. You don't feel like, oh, I have to get this done. Now it's like you're learning something new. And one thing about practicing sports such as boxing or anything of that nature, it keeps your mental sharp because now you're challenging your mind. So you're not just challenging your body, you're challenging your mind to remember what the punch is, to remember the stance, and to remember things of that nature. So as you grow older, it keeps your mind and your mental sharp. Okay, and then it helps you burn off calories effectively. And then overall, it just improves your quality of life. And that's really the number one thing about working on your physical health is just to improve your quality of life. And so you cannot have one of these components and not the other. You can't have great sleep with a terrible diet and no fitness, okay? You cannot have great sleep, great fitness, and a terrible diet. They really all come together, okay? And so one thing I would like to challenge everybody to do is take at least 2 or 3 of these things that we've talked about and try to add it to your daily regimen. Don't take anything out yet, okay? Because if we're creating lifestyle changes, as you begin to add different things to your lifestyle regimen, your regimen and the things you do on a daily basis, as a result, you will start to shy away from certain things. You will see how great that your body feels, and it will make you not want to eat these things anymore. It will make you not want to lay around in bed for too long because you'll see the effects and you'll feel the difference, okay? Now, I did go over quite a bit, and though it was a lot of information, it's just a fraction of really what you need to be successful and to create these lifestyle changes. So if you guys have any questions or you need any help, you need an accountability partner or you're looking for training, I left the business number for Mayweather Boxing and Fitness right there at 909-493-5745. You guys can contact us and we can set up a health and fitness consultation for you guys, and we can get you started on this fitness journey and these lifestyle changes that you're trying to accomplish, okay? I also left my email if you have any questions, as well as the address to the gym. If you want to come out and try to, take a class, try the class, and get some boxing work in, we'll be there 6 of the 7 days out of the week, all right? Thank you, and I hope this has inspired you guys to improve your physical fitness.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Darius. That was fantastic. In sum, what we're trying to do is give you information that can help you individually, can help your community, can help your household, people that are around you. What we'll be doing is we'll be getting everyone that RSVP'd an email with follow-up information related to our agencies, the agencies and the businesses that you saw speak. I think it's just so incredibly important. Faith without works is dead. We're sitting here in the church and everything, but listen, you might be praying for a miracle, but the body has the power to do some wonderful things if you work with it. What I got from, everybody is going to speak from their own perspective. So a couple things that came through from me with Brother McCance is that, I guess I need to turn the TV off because I like to leave it on all night. Okay, so I probably need to do that. And then the other part is that when I think I want a Snicker, what I really want is an apple. So, okay, so I got to do what I got to do, But we're getting on the road. We got to be really intentional about taking care of our bodies because as your body gets away, it's really hard to get back. It really is. It really is. And so I appreciate all of the wonderful speakers, Kamala Gray, giving us great information on family law. I'll never look at Dr. Dre the same again. But, it's just really important getting rid of those myths. A lot of times we have these assumptions about family law, about how things ought to go. something has my name on it, and so everything's fine, and it's not theirs, or it has their name on it, and so I'm not liable, or whatever else. We got to get past that. Jocelyn, you gave us some sense of things that were available for victims that I didn't know. I mean, a lot of us didn't know. It's really, really important, and that what the prosecutor's office does is multidimensional. And that's really, really important. Jonathan gave us some great information about demystifying mental health. It cannot be said enough that we have got to demystify it and deal with these problems as if they actually exist, but as if we can deal with them. COVID's created a lot of problems for a lot of folks, and we have to deal with it. There was no playbook, guys, from 100 years ago. This is how you deal with your mental health in the time of a pandemic. This is new for a lot of us, okay? And so we really have to deal with it. And of course, Coach McCann's given us some great info related to taking care of your body. And I think that what was really important about that is that you let us know that we didn't have to be Adonis. We didn't have to be perfect physically. You know, a lot of times we tell ourselves, like it's climbing a mountain, that we're going to get better physically, but we think there's this all or nothing proposition where we got to stop eating meat. We got to run 10 miles a day. You really broke it down in a way that said, here are some things that are attainable for you. Pick a couple of them and get on the road. And that's really important. And even in the last 6 months, I've gotten back with a trainer. It might be a little bit of a different thing. But I've gotten back with a trainer, and now I'm at the place where I'm really prioritizing training-related stuff because it makes my body feel better. It makes my mind feel better. I probably lost about 20 pounds in the last 6 months, whereas 3 years ago when I lost 20 pounds, I did it in 4 weeks, and it was too fast, and I wasn't able to keep it. You can only eat so much brown rice and Brussels sprouts, man. You know what I mean? And so now, yesterday I had some Wendy's, okay? You know what I mean? It was a hamburger. It was cool. It had meat in it, the whole thing. So, but today, you know, I'll do a little bit different. So, you know, might be a little bit of a cheat day. But anyway, we're going to get you some follow-up information. I want to make sure you guys let folks know this information is very current, things that can really, really help folks. It's a very, very well-kept secret. CALIC is, but we're building more momentum and letting folks know that there's good information to be had out there that can really help you live your life better. All right, guys, Joe Richardson here. CALIC February. Sometimes stuff happens, and this time we had internet problems. We had trouble getting on the internet. We had a full show ready to go, and we actually filmed the show. But because of some things, we actually know the name of everyone at Frontier now. But because of some issues, we weren't able to come on. So for those of you that were looking to do it live, ready to watch it live, we apologize for that. But let folks know that the product is available. It's available as an on-demand product, and people can still get it, can still take advantage of it. And our whole intention was to make it as a on-demand product so that it can be available long-term. But so again, apologies to our folks that were trying to do the live stream. We learned some lessons with that today. Sometimes things happen, but we still got a great product for you. So enjoy CALIC February 2022 and let folks know. Okay, thanks.